Welcome to the Power of Oxygen First, where we scale your life first so your business can actually breathe. I'm your host, Dot Rock. Oxygen First means you protect your energy first. You build your life first. You take care of your nervous system first. Then you scale. Because success without oxygen, that's just burnout with better branding. Around here, we talk about real leadership, how to hire your peanut butter instead of just doing it all yourself, how to fire with grace when something's expired, no more breadcrumbs, how to grow or go, and how to receive support without apologizing for it. This isn't hustle culture. It's sustainable success. It's leadership with oxygen. So let's pause and take a deep breath. Let's build something that actually feels like home. Hello, my podcast friends. Welcome to the Power of Oxygen First. So, today I want to talk about something that has been a little heavy on my heart in my personal life, and I've been thinking a lot about how it also happens in the workplace. So, this is all about avoiding one hard conversation and what that could be costing you. Now, this could be in your personal life, this could be in your business, and this is often in both. When I look at this pattern in my life, I realize that it sort of always has existed, and there's mirrors to it, right? There's parts of me that are so assertive and speak my truth, and there's other parts with certain relationships, specifically my first family, my parents, my brother, and in relationships where I might walk on some eggshells instead of having a conversation. So I just want to kind of talk about what avoiding hard conversations cost us because I like efficiency and I like for us to function at these higher levels. So today, as I'm recording, it's a Saturday afternoon. My son's going to have his second surgery here for the arm situation on Wednesday of this upcoming week. And so I'm just sitting here in my cozies about to record this. If you're watching on YouTube, I hope you can settle in and just think about how this might apply in your life. I've been thinking about it in mine, and I am 44 years old, which, by the way, 44 is my lucky number. Four was always my luckiest number. And 44 and 444, those are all my angel signs that I love to see. And I think a lot has been shifting in my life in this 44th year. So I'm 44. And actually, let's be real, I'm 44 and a half if you count halves, because we certainly count halves in my house. We love to celebrate the little joys in life. And half birthdays are amazing, which I just have to say about myself while I'm 44, and look, I have a podcast. I am really assertive, I'm well spoken, and I'm not afraid of being misunderstood. And I'm certainly not afraid to confront difficult situations. I mean, if you think about it, I earned the nickname the Velvet Hammer in the workplace because of the way I confront employees, and I often fired them. And better yet, I actually usually get people to resign, right? Like it's part of who I am having these conversations, but I am human. And like I said earlier, I have mirrors and shadows. And even I don't always tackle a hard situation in my personal life. And a lot has changed for me in the past few years. And I'm really realizing as I look at those changes and I look at where I'm at, that a big part of those changes occurred in my life from setting boundaries, from speaking boundaries. Those were boundaries that I chose, things that felt like home to me, things that even I would not compromise, right? Like to myself. Like if I said them to somebody else, it was so important to me that I would do what it takes. If they didn't honor the boundary, that I still would, because I knew when I spoke those boundaries, it was important energetically to me. That really was the biggest reason I can find for my latest divorce from my second marriage that happened a couple years ago, right? I really knowing what my boundary was, meaning what my needs were, feeling into that and saying those out loud, and then holding the line if somebody else didn't honor that, right? There were a lot of energetic leaks before I started doing that. So I am good at having hard conversations in my work life, really good at it. I'm an HR manager, I'm a CPA. I have hard conversations a lot and I love them in the workplace. But in my personal life, like I said, those mirrors, I used to be a bit of an eggshell walker, especially with the ones I love the most, my significant relationships, my parents, my brother, like I said. And I really think if I look at it, I spent the first 41 years or so not having those really hard conversations that I'm good at in the workplace with my nearest and dearest people, with the relationships that are intermingled in my life the very most, even if it's an ex that I'm divorced from, like my son's father. I do have this ability to read people, to read the room, and I think I can also just feel everyone's emotions and what their responses will be and predict the outcome of what my words can and will do to them. So speaking my truth can be hard. But I'm really seeing how, because I'm hyper vigilant about holding some of this, I'm seeing that impact on my nervous system and in my entire life. And so a couple years ago, I really stopped doing that. But there was one area that I didn't, or that I'd say, working on. And I started to then, but it's something that I'm continuing to need to do because it turns out these conversations are usually not once and done, even in the workplace. They're continuing conversations. I think we would all love it if they were just these band-aids we could just rip off and all the hair on our arms would come right off. But it's not how it works. We have to repeatedly have these conversations. And I'm sharing this because it's something I'm battling and struggling with so very much right now. And I know why I do it, this hypervigilance to see how other people would respond. And but I also am seeing this impact on my nervous system and impacts my entire life. Causes me to have an autoimmune disease, right? So I I don't want to shame an earlier part of myself that did this, was hypervigilant, walked on eggshells to protect myself from abuse. And especially when I was younger, weaker, in an abusive marriage, right? Like there are reasons I did this and I became like this. And there are reasons for all of us, even in the workplace. But it is a skill to start reading these situations and becoming hyper vigilant. And it is a choice to choose to not confront someone. And now I can. I really feel like I've done a lot of work and I can confront some of these things. But the skill that I had of hypervigilance turned into me not confronting my son's dad for his impact on our child, for his lack of relationship, for his inability to connect. Really, I kind of became a bystander to the emotional turmoil just by simply not speaking up. Now, I was trying to avoid fights or emotions that were high, and I was trying to avoid hurting his feelings. And then it finally became too hard not to hold my tongue. The impact on my son Dominic was too much. The impact on me for not having a day off from my son in 2 years, from the parenting plan not being honored, it became too much. It became too much to protect his father's feelings over my own and over my son's. The choice to hold my tongue meant I was protecting him more than I was my son. And I see that often in so many of my friends' lives. We just don't confront that one person, that one family member, that one neighbor, that one coach, because we don't want to experience their explosion, their abuse, their meltdown, their emotional instability. And somehow we really do convince ourselves that holding this in our bodies is the best solution. But I'm here to share with you that I have found in my life this is not a solution. This is delaying a problem and holding it for later. It's an energy leak. So, about a month ago, before my son's first surgery for this situation, my son's dad was in town. He showed up at a baseball game, and this conversation was way overdue. And I'm going to call it a come to Jesus talk, so to speak. He actually initiated it, and I erupted. And honestly, when the conversation started, I do have to say, all I wanted was out of that situation and out of that moment. I kept looking around for other parents to save me. I wanted to be anywhere but right there. But I did have clarity before the conversation. I knew some of the things that needed to be said. So did the conversation go perfectly? Not a chance. No way. I was so far from perfect. And there are so many things I wish I had said. And I still might. And I still hope I do. And there are plenty of things I could have said even better, calmer, more gracefully. And I think some of those excuses often cause us to not have these conversations. But it's okay to have imperfect conversations. Let this episode be your permission to have imperfect conversations because we need to say the hard things. We need to say things that people don't want to hear. We need to say things that they can do with what they choose because I needed to with his father. I know it's not stuff he wanted to hear. I know I said hard things. I know it hurt him. I didn't want to hurt him. Big part of why I held it. But the thing is, those words, even the imperfect ones, they just no longer live in my head and in my body. I released them, I said them out loud, and those deep energy leaks for me are gone. Now, there's plenty of follow up conversation to have, and I'm working on that. And I'll report back to you. You'll be my accountability partners as I do. But what was really interesting about this situation is right after the conversation, I walked with him to my car, where my son was standing, our son, and our son confronted his dad right then and there. He didn't even know we had had that conversation. He just wondered where we were. But he had a conversation with his dad, and he said, I don't ever want to see you or speak with you again. And it hit me in that moment when we were driving home that the thing is we cannot teach our children what we do not do. And somehow, energetically, I think he must have been waiting for me to speak up for him. And somehow it gave him the power to do the same. It was really hard, though. I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't. There were a lot of tears that followed for both of us. I'm sure for all three of us. But my conversation and my son's conversation stopped an extreme energetic leak that we both had. And again, more conversations are needed over time, but the massive, massive leak is gone. And we really both feel better. And I often see this dysfunction in both personal lives and in the businesses that I work with. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about this today. I see it in systems, in schools, in groups of people, and even when I go out to eat. It's one of the things that I also call the loudest person in the restaurant theory. And you know what I'm talking about. That person that's the loudest, yelling at staff, making demands, making a scene. Most everyone in restaurants tiptoe around that person. They walk on eggshells, they accommodate them, and they try to quiet them, sit them back at their table without really saying, "Hey, you're a jerk. You need to stop. You need to leave the restaurant." Really, they should probably kick them out. But I feel like I was actually kind of doing this with Dom's dad by not speaking my truth and by protecting his feelings at the expense of mine and at the expense of Dominic's. And like I said, it happens in businesses. We see entire companies adapting around one dysfunctional person, one process, one client or situation because nobody wants to have the damn conversation. And listen, I really do understand. Like I said, I struggle with it too. Hard conversations are uncomfortable. Let's give them permission to be uncomfortable. They can be awkward. People will cry, they can get defensive, They suddenly develop creative memories about all the conversations we had where we said something else that we didn't. It's like the creative memory. But I can promise you, avoiding the conversation does not make discomfort disappear. It in fact makes it grow. It spreads it around like COVID. It's just makes that big energy leak, the oxygen leak, as I'll call it. I think it makes it more detrimental and more powerful than it would be. I do believe that leaders who avoid 10 minutes of discomfort create 10 months of dysfunction for the rest of the team. And I think I did that. I think my 10 minutes of discomfort were replaced with probably about 10 months of discomfort for my son and I, especially my son. So I'm going to call that the dysfunction tax. I have personally watched an entire business start twisting itself into a human pretzel around one unresolved problem, one people problem. Long time ago, I worked at a school district where there was one individual in a top management role. Oh gosh, he was such a jerk, you guys. Like, king tut of jerks. Like, if you think that President Trump bullies people and is like kind of rude, this guy was just like that. He bullied everyone and anyone in his path. And like, he wasn't even president, right? He manipulated people, he bullied, and everyone was so scared of him and what he might do or what he might say next. They really gave him a lot of power with his bad attitude, with his bad behavior. Everyone seemed scared of him. And it was almost like a childhood bully growing all the way up and still bullying. And everyone could recognize it as bullying. And people fell for that narcissistic charm also, and they would not confront it. Everyone's afraid. I think that I confronted it a fair amount, not even as much as I wish I had at this point, but I did. And honestly, ultimately, this individual rose to the highest position of power right after I left. And I heard about countless people getting hurt because what I do know is along the way, many people chose to stay quiet. Many people chose to stay on his side. They chose to talk about him behind his back, but not to his boss. And there was this culture there that didn't deal with problems like this. There was a culture that ignored the issues and pushed them under the rug. And there was a culture that gave men like him power. I recently read a newspaper article about that very school district, and now they're experiencing extreme financial issues a year after he was forced out. And I can promise you it was from mismanagement. It was from poor leadership. It wasn't from a lack of tax dollars. It was from a lack of managing those. And of course, no solution. There's no absolutes in life, but I believe it was a very bad leadership situation, right? So I had eventually left that job to start my own business. And because I wanted one that felt very different from that situation, I wanted one that felt like freedom and a breath of fresh air. And here, you know what I've learned now from working with lots of businesses? Businesses just rarely wake up one morning and announce, hey, good news, everyone, starting today. We're going to lower our standards. We're going to exhaust our best employees. We're going to confuse our clients. We're going to create 6 unnecessary spreadsheets because we are scared to give Brad feedback. It's usually not an official strategic plan to ignore the biggest, loudest person in the room. It actually happens really slowly. Maybe Brad misses deadlines and someone reminds him about them. And then someone starts reminding him earlier to manage him. And someone starts beginning to check his work before it actually goes back to the customers. Or how about Brad being the guy who yells at the customers, is short with one, and then someone helps that customer next time? Or Brad is the one that complains the most, creates the most drama, and is so loud, but no one says anything. or no one says anything to his face. Brad could be that guy that complains or causes scenes in the weekly staff meeting. You guys know who I'm talking about, right? And eventually the manager starts distributing Brad's responsibilities, but Brad still has his job title and his paycheck, and it's all fully intact, right? And about 6 months later, it seems like Brad's doing great. How could he not be? We took everything off his plate. He has a full support staff dedicated to making it look like he's doing his job. This is the business of adapting around dysfunction. And every workaround, honestly, comes with an invoice. And that's what I'll call the rework tax. Remember, someone was checking his work, correcting his work, redoing the work, explaining the work, apologizing for the work, quietly completing the work late at night, while muttering all kinds of things that are super inappropriate to be on the Slack channel, right? But these people like Brad that I'm talking about, these are the ones in high school and college that we didn't want on our group project. These are the ones that I see so many businesses still employing because the business thinks it's paying one salary to perform a role, right? But they may actually be paying three people's salary to produce one person's output. It's not just an HR problem, it's a profitability problem. And it's an energetic problem, right? Like a true oxygen leak. This is where my CPA brain really enters the chat because I'm like, okay, look, the salary on the payroll report is not the only cost. The energetic leak and everybody else's time and energy, it's counting everyone else's time and the mistakes and the lost opportunities and the client damage, maybe even losing clients and the emotional support, all of it that is required to keep Brad safe, I guess. So what we now have is not even just a rework tax. It's not just the dysfunction task, it's leadership tax, you guys. This is the time spent talking about the person instead of talking to the person. I was doing this with my son's father. I was talking to my friends a lot about him. That's a leadership tax. There's meetings amongst leadership. What are we going to do about Brad? What if, well, Brad's been going through a lot. Well, Brad's been going through a lot since 2019, people. Maybe we should give Brad another chance. No, we've already given Brad 14 chances. Should we schedule another meeting? And congrats, you guys. Once again, the whole company has spent more time discussing Brad's performance than Brad has even spent performing, right? It's like when I have girlfriends talking about their husbands behind their back, if they would just talk to their husbands instead of the rest of us trying to dissect their marriage, maybe they would get somewhere, right? By the way, on that note, I do whatever I can to not spend time with people who talk about their spouses like that. And we need to be very cautious of that in the workplace because leaders can really spend hours preparing for, worrying about, avoiding, discussing, and emotionally recovering from one conversation they refuse to have. We all become the workaround, and the manager becomes the babysitter of these types of employees, and the HR consultant becomes the emotional support person. I don't want to be the more emotional support person. We need to have these hard conversations because people need to be doing the jobs they were actually hired to do. And so when the leadership tax happens, guess what? There's one more tax. It's the trust tax. Our high performers are watching. They know no one's following through and no one's having the conversation. My son knew. I was encouraging him to have a conversation I wasn't having. They know, those people know if work gets checked. They know who's allowed to behave really badly because they're really valuable. They've been here forever, or they just seem to be going through something. But our best employees do not need perfection from leadership. They need to know that the standards we talk about are real, that the expectations we set are enforced, not selectively, but by everyone. because otherwise people stop believing that performance matters. Then they start thinking, why am I working this hard? Why am I carrying this? Why does Brad have the same title as me when I am also doing Brad's job? And eventually, our strongest people don't actually confront us. They update their resumes and they leave. It's just like in a marriage when someone has the same conversation repeatedly. Once there's not movement on things changing, when we've drawn some lines in the sand, people leave. People get divorces, right? Because that's the opportunity tax. Business says it does not have enough capacity to grow because we don't have these conversations. And sometimes it's not actually a capacity problem, it's an unresolved people problem. We can't take on new clients because of Brad, because someone has to supervise Brad. We can't take on a new launch because the service manager is cleaning up from Brad's mistakes. And we can't promote our strongest employee because she's the only person holding Brad's entire department together. So we can't promote somebody, right? The business just starts building its future around the limitations of a situation that it refuses to resolve because it's not having a conversation. And that's really expensive, my friends. That's where I say the oxygen tax comes in. And there's this cost that doesn't always appear on the financial statements. It's the heaviness, it's the walking on eggshells, it's the meetings before the meeting, it's the meeting that begins with, how do I say this nicely? And it's those wake ups in the middle of the night by upper management thinking about rehearsing a conversation. It's the employees coming home irritated with their family because they spent the entire day covering up for Brad. And it's not just a business losing money, it's consuming the oxygen of every human adapting around the problem. And that's why it really matters to me. It's expensive, you guys. Support is not the same as subsidizing dysfunction. If this is not about firing people the first time they make a mistake, I promise you that. People are human. They need feedback and they need training. They need tools, support, accommodations, clarity, and reasonable opportunity to improve. That's responsible leadership. But supporting a person that does not do that does not respond to conversation, is the same as subsidizing endless dysfunction. Because healthy support, you guys, it sounds like here is what is expected. Here is where the gap is. Here is the support available. Here is what needs to change. And here is when we will evaluate whether it has changed. Adapting around dysfunction sounds a lot more like, let's not upset Brad. Let's just have somebody else handle it. I know it's frustrating. Brad so means well. We should probably document that, but I haven't lately. And no, kindness without clarity is not kindness. It is confusion with a smiley face attached, my friends. We have to be able to have these hard conversations. We can't just be nice to be nice. We need to get clear and then have the conversation. And they may not even always be with an employee, right? These hard conversations. Sometimes these conversations could be with a client that drains our energy and our team and pays late. They can be with a manager who refuses to manage. Sometimes it's with the CEO who's just absent too much. It could be with a business partner who wants the authority but not the responsibility, right? And it could be with a family member. And it could be with a family member on payroll. Gosh, I can't even tell you how many times I run into that situation. Those are really not fun. But in my case, it could also be a conversation that's overdue with your ex-husband who you haven't been married to for 13 years, but you still have a child together. And sometimes that conversation may be with yourself because sometimes you already know what needs to happen. You just don't want to be the person to make it happen. But silence is not neutral. My silence wasn't. Silence simply assigns the cost to someone else. Someone always carries the weight of the conversation that leadership refuses to have. And in my case, I was the leadership, and my son carried around the weight of that conversation. That did not happen. So here's your oxygen first check for today. Where has your business created a workaround instead of having a conversation? What are people checking, correcting, carrying, cleaning up that does not belong to them? Whose behavior is getting translated at work? Which expectation has quietly changed because leadership does not want to enforce it? And most importantly, what does everyone know, but no one is saying out loud? And finally, one more question while I'm thinking about it. What are we doing only because we refuse to address what is actually happening? Because every workaround is an invoice, and you're paying for it with time or profit or trust or opportunity or in our personal lives. And we're paying for it in oxygen, in our energy, right? I just want you to really think about that. And if you know exactly who or what I've been talking about this entire episode, but you do not want to say, you don't want to document it, and you think it would be easier to just book a strategy call with me, I can walk you through my grow or go decision framework, and I can meet with you in a Fire with Grace strategy call where we would look at the facts and I would help you seek clarity within an hour. We could look at the business impact and we could talk about framing the right conversation instead of reorganizing the entire company around a problem you already know exists. So if you're interested in that, you can probably find a link in my show notes to book one of those calls. And also, before we get too close to being complete in this podcast episode, I want to give you a couple of journal prompts to leave you with. The biggest question I have for you is, the conversation I have been avoiding is blank. Again, ask yourself, the conversation that I have been avoiding is blank. And so for some of us, there's a couple of them. There's a couple conversations that need to be had. The next question is, who is currently paying the price because I have not had that conversation? And the third question is, what would become easier if I named what is actually happening and had the conversation? Because you do not need to keep asking your best people, to become human shock absorbers for a problem leadership is unwilling to address. And sometimes that leadership is in the parenting role. We have to name what is happening. We have to have those conversations. We have to restore the standard, and we have to give the business and all of the humans inside of it and all of our children their oxygen back. We have to. We will regret it if we don't. So until next time, put on your oxygen mask first and enjoy whatever it is that you're doing out there that is not the conversation with Brad, but please have the conversation with Brad. This conversation reminded you that you don't have to do it all alone. That's your cue. Go download the free Support and Breathe Return on Investment Calculator at .rockconsulting.com. It's a quick, slightly eye-opening way to see how much time, money, and energy you could reclaim with the right support. And remember, support does not always mean hiring. Sometimes it's a simple ask. Sometimes it's a boundary. And sometimes it's finally letting someone be your peanut butter. If something in this episode resonated, please come tell me. I'm on Instagram at @_rock_, and I genuinely love hearing what lands for you so I can create more of them. And remember, your energy is your greatest asset. Protect it, invest in it, and always put on your oxygen mask first. I'll see you next week.